Go to it, Ray.
That's my review.
Close enough. Don't confuse me.
Am I on yet? Before we get started, why don't we pledge allegiance to the flag as we normally do?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call the Audit Committee to order.
I call the school committee to order, and I was also asked to make mention that if you have a cell phone off, if you could please mute it so it doesn't broadcast over TV.
Call the Finance Committee to order. I call the Board of Selectmen to order.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us this evening. The most important fact in the audit is not only to ensure that the numbers are correct, but to also get a sense of where our weaknesses are. And I think Mr. Roselli has done that very well. You've all had a copy of the report, had an opportunity to look at it. The Audit Committee previously met on February 17th with Tony Roselli, the town treasurer, and the town accountant. And at that time, we reviewed a lot of our concerns and got some answers from them. The format that I'd like to follow this evening is a little different than previous years. Previous years, it was more a free-for-all. But since I spend an awful lot of time reviewing this report, and you'll still have an opportunity to ask questions. What I'd like to do is to, as I go through it, I've kind of identified 3 areas of importance that we need to concentrate on. And number one is those areas that need immediate action that we need to do within the month or so or the next month. And the areas, the ongoing improvements, number 2. And the third area is long-term solutions. So I've divided in those 3 areas. Beginning with the area which I believe needs immediate actions. I've identified 7 of them. And if any members of the group find that more action should be involved in that, please let us know. The number 1 is the monthly balancing between the treasurer and the accounting office. Number 2 is the continued improvement cooperation between the school and the town. Number 3, continued to insist on better service from Harper Payroll Service. Number 4, the school department payroll posting in a timely fashion as required by the accountant and payroll service. Number 5 is improved withholding posting regarding employees' deductions and retired employees. Number 6, improved betterment posting and accounting between the accountant and the treasurer. And the 7th one is the financial policy, which is the responsibility of the select board. This is a requirement by the DOR. On the ongoing improvements,
Mr.
I've
Chair?
identified the special revenues
Mr. Chair?
account.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes.
I might. Some of these have been addressed. I'd like the town manager to say
Well,
what...
we're not there yet. We'll cover that. We'll cover that. On the ongoing improvements, when I finish with my comments, then we'll open that up. On the ongoing improvements, I've identified special revenue accounts, water and sewer receivables. And the long-term solutions, I've looked at the Munis software program, the payroll system, recycling center, tax collection, and ambulance abatement policies. Now, those are the areas that I've identified. I realize that under the first section, areas that need immediate action, a large number of these have already been taken care of. They've worked under. So they're, there's not much more to do there, but there's still a few improvements that have to be done in that area. Is there any other addition that you'd like to add to that? More improvements that we've...
If I could, Mr. Chair, so I haven't had an opportunity to look at the list that you provided this evening. Listening to you list off how you've identified them and characterized each of those findings in any one of the three sections that you're suggesting, I haven't had a chance to think about it too much. I'm not sure I'm in complete agreement with the list and how you've prioritized those. My understanding about this evening was I'd like to have all the boards allow Mr. Roselli to make his presentation on his audit and primarily his management letter. Provide the boards here this evening with an update on some of the conversations he's had since this management letter and the audit period that ended 8 months ago. And for those who haven't met Eric Kinshirf yet, Eric has been here. He's a consultant that the town hired a number of months ago who's been providing some guidance and assistance to the accounting departments. I believe Mr. Roselli may rely on Mr. Kinshirf to provide some validation to what staff and I have provided to him as far as information goes and operations and improvements that have occurred since Mr. Roselli has had the opportunity to audit them. So at this point, I guess what I'm trying to say is we have had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Roselli a number of times, and we've assured him that a number of the issues that were raised at the June 15 audit have been either addressed or corrected. Mr. Roselli hasn't had the opportunity to audit those 2000 fiscal 16 records, so he can't verify that, in fact, what we're telling him is accurate. However, Mr. Kinshirf can. So between those two individuals, I think that the information they can provide to this board will address the areas of concern that were raised at June 30th and where the town and the school committee or school staff, where they stand right now with regards to addressing the shortcomings that were found in that report.
Good. Well, that was my next point. I was going to ask Mr. Roselli to go through the report, and as we go through them, if some of the members have any questions, it's the time to ask them. The only reason for my comments were that as an audit committee member, I felt it was important that we identify these particular areas because I think they're very important. They need to be solved. Some need to be solved immediately. Some we can work on gradually. And then the long-term solution. Basically, I don't want this to be a review like we've had in years past, where a lot of these were read through, questions were asked, and then the material was put into a filing cabinet someplace and forgotten. This year is not going to be forgotten as far as I'm concerned as a member of the audit committee, because I want to follow up on every one of these to make sure that they are been taken care of. So, Mr. Roselli, if you will, please.
Okay. Thank you. So, I looked at my calendar this morning, and I was here a year ago today. It was March 2nd because of leap year or whatnot, but it was the Monday night meeting a year ago this week. So we've basically done a full circle here. And I was reflecting on, what happened, why did we get to where we did, June 30th, where are we today? So a lot of things were going through my mind as I was practicing for this today. And back a year ago, I looked at my notes, And one of the comments, which was quoted the next day in the newspaper, was I compared this to a Twilight Zone episode. The monsters are due on Maple Street. And for those of you that are not familiar with that episode, it's when extraterrestrials come down and come to a small town, and they get all the people at this small town to get mad at each other, and in the end, they destroy each other. And they cut back to the extraterrestrials that say, we don't need weapons of mass destruction. We just infiltrate them with thoughts, and they kill each other, so we can take over this planet pretty easily. So I thought it was a good analogy because at that time, everybody was pointing fingers. Nobody was accepting blame for anything. At that time, I wasn't confident that June 30, 15 would be clean. I had my question marks on how good the close would be. And everyone seemed confident that night, but in the back of my mind, I said, there's too much going on. You've got deficit legislation that's going through. You've got payroll issues that are happening. You've got a Munis system that's just not configured correctly. How is all this going to get fixed by the end of June? And when we got here to look at the June 30, 15 numbers, it kind of played out as I thought. There were variances. There were records that were difficult to follow. Departments just trying to compare the records between the departments weren't agreeing, and it was kind of what I expected. And what happened is we have a management letter that's got 4 or 5 material weaknesses, and then a bunch of other comments that, in aggregate, there's a lot here. So this is what I expected, and this is what I wrote. And the one thing that's important to note here is that all the financial people involved in this are in agreement that they all had some role in why this got this way. Every one of them. Everyone I've talked to have said, yeah, we understand there were problems. We understand it needs to be fixed. And I think that's really important because if you point fingers, it's never going to solve anything. But if you accept responsibility and say, I'm going to do something about this, I think a lot of progress can be made. And I've had a few conversations with Eric Kinshirf. I've talked to the financial people. I've had a number of conversations with Mr. Hickey. I've had some conversations with the superintendent and the school business office. And where this town is today, not June 30, 15, where it is today, is trending where I'm very pleased with where it's trending. I haven't been able to really look at the assertions, which is why I requested that Mr. Kinshirf be here, because it's a different year of audit, so we haven't looked at it. But in talking to Eric, reconciliations are now being done. Department heads are now working together. Solutions are being problems are being vetted, solutions are being made as a result of that vetting, and things are going where they should be, such that if it continues at this pace, I would expect June 30 of 16 to be in far better shape than June 30 of 15. So those are just my opening remarks, and we could go through each finding if you want. I just gave that was a general overview. We could go through each. Would you like to do that next? Just kind of
Yeah, please do so, yeah.
go through each finding?
Please do so. Then that way there, if the members have any questions, they can
Sure.
direct them to either you or Eric, and
Okay, so let's start with the most significant findings, which are the material weaknesses. And the number one material weakness when we go to a municipality, if cash doesn't balance, it's automatic. It's a material weakness. If you can't get your cash in balance, you might as well pack up your suitcases and go home and come back when it is in balance, because if cash doesn't balance, it doesn't matter about the rest of the audit. So cash, as you can see, did not balance during the year. There were a number of reasons why. You had the payroll conversion, and I'm going to let Eric jump in a little bit, but you've got the payroll conversion, you've got the transition from the self-insured method of insurance to the premium-based method of insurance. You've got the Munis issues, where the workarounds are so inefficient, it's really just very difficult to get to a number. And that just resulted in a lot of things that just didn't mesh well, or didn't blend well. And I don't know, Eric, you want to jump in on the cash rec and what you found specifically as you went through that?
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Eric Kinshirf. You know, when I looked at the cash, the first thing that came to mind was I knew that the payrolls themselves weren't being posted. So usually when you do cash reconciliations, you do it by month. So you do November, December, January, February, March, whatever. So on the payroll, what we found was two things. One is they all got posted, like 3 months of payroll got posted for 1 month, like all in March. So we couldn't do a month-by-month reconciliation. Secondly, the payroll entries that were being made weren't being checked before they went in, and they were incorrect as for missed postings. So basically, the first thing I had to do was get a handle on the actual payrolls, like make a schedule of what actually happened, and just match it up to the general ledger. So it's analogous to, I always look at it as like a big ball of yarn, and you take one piece at a time and just, get that straightened out. The second thing was, when the payroll does get posted, there's like 3 different funds into play. There's like the general fund, because there's a health insurance appropriation there. There's an agency fund with all the withholdings. Then there's the health claims trust fund. And the way Munis is set up is all those funds get entries that go between all those funds each payroll. And what happened is those entries were misfiring on a lot of levels. So it's almost like somebody threw like a hand grenade in the general ledger and it just went everywhere. So we basically, through a process, we looked at it, we straightened it out, we found out which entries should go where, and we figured that out. So the bottom line is we were able to reconcile cash. Probably took like 4 or 5 business days, and the net result was that there was some withholding entries that weren't made. You saw like the health claims, the health insurance fund didn't get properly credited, and there was a whole list of things that you addressed at the town meeting. So we went through that, and then they decided, which was good news for me, that they wanted me to actually, on a monthly basis, come in and help keep the reconciliations going. Because since we did all that work to reconcile as of June 30th, let's start reconciling for this current year. So the town accountant and I have been working on doing the cash reconciliations. And the way the systems are now, the first couple months were a little tough, but now it doesn't take time at all. As a matter of fact, we just got done today reconciling through January 31st, and it took us probably about 5 to 10 minutes to do, because now all the systems, the entries are coming through the way they should. So cash is now reconciled through through January 31st. So I feel really good about that. We have control of the cash. So that was like the biggest problem. Now I haven't gotten involved in the reconciliation of receivables or withholdings yet, but the town accountant has, kept, working on that. We also went through the budget to actual in the general fund. The one weakness that I do see currently is the software system, because right now, through the system, you cannot get a good report to look at all your grant balances, what the grant balances are. So right now, we have to, the town accountant has to take the information from the Munis system and create an Excel spreadsheet to get good grant balances. So that's like one area that needs to be improved. So that is basically kind of where we stand now as far as everything goes. So I'm feeling really good that everything's kind of going on real nice. And the second thing is the Health Claims Trust Fund now it's being phased out. So that's one less fund. Like I mentioned, there was 3 funds being hit with all these entries happening. Now that the Health Claims Trust Fund is kind of like out of the picture, it's like phasing out. And it's great, so we're just looking at 2 funds. The deficit borrowing is covering any deficits that were in the Health Claims Trust Fund. So I feel like we have a, pretty good accounting system as far as that goes. So
Okay.
things are definitely looking up.
So was there, I just want to make sure I'm clear, was there kind of a mix-up when we switched over from self-insured to the,
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, because there was a mix-up there, because what happened was the withholdings from the withholdings from the employees, they used to go into the Health Claims Trust Fund, and things used to get paid out of there, but when we went to premium-based, the withholdings are supposed to go into a different account and pay the premium-based. So the same with the retirees. So there was like a little mix-up for like 1 month, like 1 month went into the one fund and not the other, that type of thing. So that transition from a premium-based to a self-insured was a little bumpy, but we figured that out, and that was part of like the entries that
okay,
were
so
made.
there were no shortages, just that there was a mix-up in
Where,
coding or balancing?
exactly,
Okay.
yep.
Now, what about the Harper payroll service? Are they up to date with us, or it's kind of,
Well, I'm only seeing it.
it seems to be sticking out there all the time.
Right. I'm only seeing, like, right now, when we first started, those journal entries that were coming over from Harper's weren't right, and we had to go through and correct them. But currently, they seem, I mean, when we're doing the cash, they seem like they're coming through right. They're hitting cash the right way. Like I said, in the timeliness, I know it's January 31st, but everything was all set. So to speak to how that information is getting into the general ledger, I think those problems have been kind of fixed, like on the Harper side.
Matt,
Yeah.
you had said the cash reconciliation is correct through, hang on. Sorry. The cash reconciliation is correct through January 30th. Is that all cash reconciliation or just some small section of cash?
Oh, cash on the whole, all
Okay.
the funds.
And is that all cash reconciliation? So from July 1,
Yes, through
2015 through January 30th?
Exactly.
So that's a big deal.
Absolutely a big
Okay,
deal.
great.
Yes.
Wonderful,
Yep.
thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
You mentioned in the report, I apologize for the voice, long story that I won't go into. But you mentioned Harper in connection with the payroll a couple of times. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but over a several month period, there seemed to be a problem with the school department's payroll and Harper's. There did not seem to be a corresponding problem with the town's payroll and Harper's. Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, I found myself that when I looked at the town's payroll and the school payroll, they both needed some adjustments, like the general ledger entries that came over both needed some adjustments through Harper's, like they weren't hitting properly. The difference between the town and the school was the town's payroll was being booked to the general ledger books, because the town side, they created a journal entry from Harper's that imported directly into Munis, so that helped. But on the school side, they did not do that process, so what the school ended up doing was, they actually did the payroll twice. They actually did it in Harper's, that's how people got paid, but in order to get those journal entries into the general ledger system, they went into Munis, recreated the payroll in the Munis system, and then the general ledger entry came over that way, and that's what created the issues. So what the schools would have had to do, what I would have preferred to see was to go through the Harper's payroll, because that's exactly what people got paid, and just to do one entry for each payroll that came into the general ledger. But what was done instead was 3 months of payroll was put into Munis to mimic the actual payroll, and it was all posted on one day, like 3 months worth of payroll for one day. So that's like the distinction between the two.
Do you have any idea why it might have been done that way?
I think the problem was, I have an idea. I don't know if it's the right idea, but I think the idea was, I think they had, I don't know if the Harper's and school didn't work together, or if Harper's couldn't create the report that we could import in the general ledger. I don't know what happened, but I think obviously the school thought it was a lot easier to get those entries into the general ledger, to do it the old way through Munis and get it in that way. So I just have, that's like my thought.
Dan, do you feel comfortable that's been taken care of?
Absolutely, yeah. Now it's smooth as silk. Both sides are good. As of now, it's no problem. School in town, the payrolls are coming over fine, so.
Can we ask the school business manager to respond to that?
Just as to why you have to do it that way.
Thanks, Tom. Sure. I mean, at the time, we had just moved over from, starting in July, we started with Munis. October, we switched over to Harper's. At that point, we didn't even have the general ledger accounts set up. We didn't have a notepad method of posting at that time. We were kind of learning on the fly as we went. So, and the other thing that we were very concerned about at the time was any postings that we did, because we're now doing a split year where we have some entries through the Munis system and some through Harper's. Once you go to Harper's, everything that posts is just an account number and a dollar value. You have to try to back into the actual people and the issues that you might have. So our concern was, it was belt and suspenders, but we wanted to post in Munis, which we were comfortable with, which would give us names and people and dollar pays, and then make sure that when you checked it against Harper's, we had the same values there. But we wanted to make sure we had a comfort level with what was going on with Harper's by mimicking it in Munis. We don't do that any longer. Starting with the new year now, we're taking basically it's a notepad entry. It's a bunch of debits and credits that come out of the Harper system and posted into the general ledger that way. But there was kind of a learning curve to get there and a comfort level with what was going on in terms of the two systems.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yours?
Good, thank you. Oh,
Just one question. You said one of the weaknesses is the software system. The Munis runs your spreadsheet. What software system are you talking about?
I'm talking about Munis itself. The financial software is Munis. It's not configured correctly. The town accountant is working on that now, but my understanding is, and the town accountant can comment on it, my understanding is that in order to correct what needs to be corrected, she had to clean up the database now to their level. They have to upgrade to a new version, which hasn't been done yet, and at that point, they can get the account structure correct.
Talk to each other.
Right, so.
Do we have an update from Mrs. Allard on ETA of that update?
The update we have is that we finished the data review. It was the integrity of the data that needed to be reviewed so that we could see if we could even take what we currently have in the version that we have and put it to an updated version. That was completed several weeks ago, so we are able to put that data up. But as Mr. Kinshirf said, in moving forward, we still have to pretty much create a whole new chart of accounts, which is quite a bit of work. It's weeks worth of work if you're doing it full-time. It's months if you're going to try to fit it into your schedule. So it's a lot of work that needs to be done.
So are we looking at a July 1st start date for an update so we can start fresh?
I can't give you that time frame.
Oh, come on.
Jim?
If I had a
Are you getting the
crystal ball,
cooperation
maybe.
are you getting the cooperation you need from Munis on this?
Yes, we are, because everything was in stages. So we first had to go through and do an integrity review of everything that was in the general ledger. And then we just finished the payroll system a little while ago, which that had a lot of errors, which gives evidence to and reason behind why we went to Harper's instead of staying in the Munis system. As many communities use the Munis system for payroll, it works perfectly fine. It just never was set up correctly here, as anyone that's worked in it, that's come along from consultants to the actual techs from Munis have seen, it was not set up properly. So we really needed to get out of that system and get something that would work for both the town and the school. And Harper seemed like the right move at the time.
Mr. Robichaud?
Let's go back to the withholdings. Now, was that Munis created that, just did something funny with them in the system, or were they just posted to the wrong accounts?
They were just posted to the wrong accounts because when it was on the Munis payroll, when Munis processed the payroll, it was set up to hit the withholdings the correct way. But when we converted to Harper's, there was a time when those journal entries came over and they weren't hitting the right accounts, basically. So when it was in Munis, the payroll was in Munis, it was integrated, so it was set up to hit the accounts a certain way. Then we went to Harper's, a journal entry had to be created to hit the withholdings, and that was a work in process. So at the time, it was kind of a mess, and it finally worked itself out, but at the time, it was hitting the wrong accounts and so forth.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to know how confident we are that this software upgrade for Munis will improve the efficiency of this process. It sounds like the process is clunky in its own self. So, just going from 4.0 to 5.0 make the process any more efficient?
To be honest with you, I don't know why, I'm not a software expert, so I don't know why you have to upgrade to the next level. Only the technical people would know that. So I would just have to take a wait and see attitude on that, because basically what usually happens is, if you're going to create a new chart of accounts, you create the chart of accounts that you're going to use, a good one that'll work correctly, and then as of June 30th, you close the books and you get all good ending balances, and then you just do a start of year entry with all the good accounts and start from scratch going forward. But maybe I'm oversimplifying it. So
please speak into the microphone.
yeah, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I wouldn't be able to comment on that because I'm not sure technically, and maybe Munis would be the only one that would know that, why we have to go through all these upgrades and stuff before we get to the point of changing the chart of accounts. I wish that you could just change the chart of accounts using the current system instead of jumping through all the hoops. But there's probably a good reason for it, but I'm not an IT person.
So right now, the answer is we really can't improve the process in its own way? Is that what the answer is? No?
Well, Munis said that we can. They said we have to go through these steps. So we're in the process of going through the steps.
And was one of those steps doing that software upgrade? Is that what
Yes.
they're recommending? Yeah.
Yes.
The only reason why I asked that is because I assume is it a paid software upgrade? Do you have to pay to upgrade?
We paid $60,000.
So is it paid?
I'm
No?
not
Yes? No?
sure.
Well,
If I could, there was money appropriated, I think at a special town meeting, in the amount of $60,000 to facilitate some of these upgrades. It hasn't been paid yet, so that was why I was shaking my head, so, excuse me, I apologize for that. So there is monies associated with the upgrade to Munis. My understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, is that at some point, it's like, I'll use Microsoft as an example. Recently, in the last year or two, they stopped supporting one of their Microsoft platforms. You had to upgrade. I think it's the same with Munis. We're at a much older version of the software. We haven't upgraded for a number of years. Excuse me. Now they're saying, if you want us to correct it and you want us to support our product, you have to upgrade to the more current version of Munis.
Yes.
If I might. So, the Munis system that was originally installed here was not configured correctly.
Correct.
The Munis system we're going to install is configured to what we need to have moving forward.
Yes.
So, in theory, I'm going to do this, in theory,
That's why they're called theories.
that's why I'm going there. It should run smoother because we will have the system configured properly. So, and our people will be trained, because that's part of the deal, that everyone who uses the system will now be trained with the upgrades. So as it's reconfigured, everybody will be on the same page moving forward.
Right.
Again, I'm going to go in theory, everyone will be on the same page, the journal entry should go through smoother. They built a bridge between the treasurer's software and the town accountant software, that's the one they're testing now, that once that goes smoothly, when they do the upgrade, they're going to transition that bridge again.
Right.
So again, moving forward, all this upgrades in software and training and bridges will correct the deficiencies of the older Munis system.
Absolutely. And, you know, if I can paraphrase, like, what the town manager probably makes a lot of sense with, Munis would be like, yeah, I'd love to help you. We support this one version, but this old version's like way back when, so before we even fix it, let's bring you up to speed on this current version, and then we can move from there. So that's probably the logic behind it.
Anyone else? Mr. King?
We've heard about the software problem now for a year and a half at least, and certainly since we first learned about the deficit. It's something that Department of Revenue has emphasized that needs to be solved as soon as possible. We put money aside last year to do it. So we have some resources. I'm concerned that we don't have enough human resources to do it. We heard Mrs. Allen saying, well, if I could just take 3 weeks and sit down and do this, take the training, get this done, then we get over this hump. Instead, we've got a short-handed accountant office, and my concern here is that having $60,000 to pay for software doesn't get us where we need to go. We need to figure out how to get some additional human resources here to get the training in, to get the work done that needs to get done, to set up the schedule of accounts, to get over this hump. Because I'm afraid that if we don't stop and figure out how to do that, then 6 months from now we'll be saying the same thing. Well, we're trying to get it caught up. It's a people situation here. It's a need for some human capital, not just some financial resources.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Is in that $60,000 put aside for the upgrade, can any of that money be used to get some human capital to support Donna?
My understanding is the $60,000 is the cost to upgrade from our current version of Munis to the most recent version of Munis. So that $60,000, if we were to upgrade to the most recent version of Munis, we would not have any funds available for the additional personnel to assist.
Well, I don't know, I'm not an IT person, but when we, in school districts that I've been in, that when we transitioned over, part of that cost that we paid was support in helping us transfer from one system to the other, or transition from one system to the other. Part of the money that we paid up front helped, not only with the transition, but with the training and all that other stuff. So I guess I'm not understanding why some of that $60,000 couldn't be used to help, with the transition of the information and the upgrade.
I'd like to comment on that. So actually, when we first started with this, we were, okay, how much is it going to cost to get the system up and running? And that included going to an upgrade and also having some work done on it by humans other than, just an upgrade. And at the time, Mr. Roselli had thrown out a price of, well, it might cost you around $60,000 to get that done. And we said, okay, let's talk to Munis. Munis hasn't given us a price of how much this is going to cost because we don't know all the work that's entailed in this just yet. As we do have to, as we say, scrub our accounts. We've got to start from the beginning. They don't communicate with one another. That's not something that Munis set up incorrectly. That's something that a number of humans in the system over multiple years that had different ways of using the system, whether they were trained in it or not, have set up. So we need to get all those accounts to talk to each other in the proper way. This is something that Munis is providing us the platform to do that on with a new supported version. But it's not as if the Munis techs are going to clean that up for us. We've got to take care of that in some way. So hopefully that $60,000, some of that will be used. That was our original intent, was that this was like an all-encompassing amount, although we don't know that for sure. It's a work in progress. We're getting closer to finding out. It took us a year to get the integrity data review done, so this is something we're looking forward to getting some prices on and seeing where we're at. But we do have that $60,000 at least as a cushion to get the upgrade and hopefully get some tech help with that.
So if I understand you, we don't have the pricing yet for the upgrade?
No.
Why not? What's the holdup?
We weren't ready for it. We weren't sure which version we were going to go to, because there are various versions that are already ahead of where we are now, and we were doing an upgrade to a lower version, and Munis just said recently we can go in at that lower version, that they're still supporting it for at least another year. I'm saying, well, maybe we want to go out to a version that's supported for more than just one more year. So we're still in communication with them to see where we're going to be on what version, and then what the cost is associated with that version.
Well, the clock's ticking, so how do you have an estimated time when we would know what version we're going to use and how much it's going to cost? Because we've got $60,000, right? Is this what I understand? We've got $60,000. And we're going to be in a new fiscal year pretty soon. So I think it would be prudent to expedite the process so that we can not lose that money and make sure that we've got the upgrades that we need for July.
Well, that money was appropriated in an article, so we're not going to lose the money. The money will still be there in 17. We certainly would like to have, I'm sure everyone would like to have the system cleaned up before that, but it's not as if those funds are going to go away.
So I think I'm just thinking out loud, okay? So if we could get a price, and in that price we could find out if there's technical support to get it done, because maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's $45,000 and we could use $15,000 to get some human support and capital support, but we don't know yet. We took a guess, right? The 60,000 was an approximation.
At the time, there was a bunch of balls in the air. The town was trying to decide whether to go to a new system, whether to just can Munis and go to a new system. So I reached out to a couple of vendors that I'm familiar with, that in other municipalities, and that was the pricing I got from SoftWrite and KVS and some of the others. Since then, both of those companies have been bought by a company the size of Munis. So I'm not sure what that pricing is at this point. That's what it was at that time. I'm sure it's changed because the seller is now a Munis type of company. It's a very large company. So the town may have missed the window on that. In terms of the Munis upgrade, I think those numbers may have come from the town manager last year when we were talking about whether to go to a new system or whether to stay with Munis. So at this point, it probably makes sense to at least find out what the cost of the software upgrade is. If they come back and say it's $300,000, then it's probably not an option, and you just should stop putting your resources someplace else. That may be the next step, or a prudent step. And it may be 45,000, and then you could get a project, it's called a project manager. You do an RFP for a project manager,
Yeah.
and they come in and they help you with the chart of accounts and the install, and that's kind of how that works. But the first step is, let's get the real price. Call up Munis and say, what's the module going to cost? And then go from there.
Mr. Hickey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, what we can do is we can read, now that we've had some of the information we have, the integrity is much better, we have a better sense of where we are. We will reach out to Munis in the very near future and get a sense from them what version is recommended by them and what the cost is associated with that version. So we'll get a sense of what our budget should be, if there are funds available to supplement the accounting staff internally, and try to move this conversion along as quickly as we can.
Yeah, Jim?
This is right from the Division of Local Services, the Department of Revenue's financial review of the town. It says Tyler Technologies, which is Munis, is offering to provide 4 free days of direct consulting services and a 50% discount on any future training needs. So they're willing to work with this. And I would say, on another note, if we could ever have our next joint meeting, maybe we could get someone from Munis here to sit down with us. Thank you.
Right, well, in all fairness, they have, all the services they provided so far to me has been free of charge.
Anybody else? Anyone else? Okay. So we can move on?
Okay, well, that went into a bunch of different directions. So it kind of covered, or did cover, the payroll, the withholdings, and the operating system. So those, and they're all related. They're all interlinked, so that's fine. So moving right along to page 8, water and sewer usage receivables. They were out of balance this year, and what we've learned subsequent, and this is the second year in a row, that there was a broken link in the system that has been fixed, and that should be happening automatically moving forward. Is that correct?
Once the bridge is in place.
This is the lien. Right, once the bridge is in place, that should be happening automatically.
But even so, now that we're aware that this doesn't occur.
You can do it manually.
automatically, we'll do it.
You can do it manually.
If we have to.
So that's a very quick fix. It was under material because it was such a large amount, but it's a quick fix. Any questions on that?
So the water and sewer liens, you're talking about the betterment, is that what we're talking about here? When everybody
No,
has to pay their betterment?
this is water and sewer usage charges. If they're not collected in a certain amount of time, they have to go to lien.
Okay.
When they go to lien, you have to reduce the usage charge and increase the lien. What happened was the lien got increased, but the usage charge did not get decreased, so it was in both places.
Okay.
And this, now that it's been brought to everybody's attention, it should not, again, it's just an entry, either automatic or manual, that should take care of it. Okay? The next one I'd really like to spend some time on, or at least have everybody understand it, is the tax collection process. And we've talked about this 2 or 3 times in these meetings. And the town really needs to decide, how are we going to attack this? Are we just going to leave it alone, go through the normal process, or are we going to go step out of the box and do, I think, what about 60 communities are doing now, and is go to the assignment way. But basically what happens now is you assess the tax, you bill it, you try to collect it, and about 99% of it is collected. 98, 99% is collected. You get that small percentage, 1 to 2%, that becomes delinquent. So process is the collector sends out a demand letter. You advertise. If there's no response to the demand letter or the advertisement, then you go to tax title. That's the process. From tax title, it goes to tax foreclosure, and that's how you receive your funds for those delinquent accounts. There's a regulations that's been on the books for a long time, but it's just come into play since the issues with the recession back in 2009-10. A lot of communities started saying, let's adopt Chapter 60, Section 2C of the Mass General Laws, and have a third party come in and take our accounts. And they're gonna write us a check for those. They're gonna write us a check for the principal and the interest and for all the years that are due. And while they have possession of those, they are gonna pay the tax bill every year. So if they have it for 2 years, they're gonna pay that tax bill. Whereas if you left it in tax title, it might still become delinquent in future years. So I've posed that option here. Part of your deficit legislation package, your recovery package that was sent to DOR to leverage the legislation, said that this process would be done. So I thought I needed to note it here because it hasn't been done. And I can open this up for discussion just now that it's out. Any questions
For
on
my
this?
part, I think this is an area that's very important. You know, the treasurer is the most important department in town where all the funds funnel through to operate the town. And so for a lot of us who have been here for quite a while, some years ago, in order to balance the budget, a lot of personnel were let go and cut back, and the treasurer did suffer some loss. So now if we're ever going to be able to get a hold of this, we've got to beef up the treasurer's office so that we can once again operate the way we should be operating. A lot of these tax title properties should be collected in some form. I realize that there's some properties that aren't worded down, you know. They're either wetland or areas that we can't collect on. But, you know, having enough personnel in there that can follow the track of this, some of these properties could probably be sold for a minimum cost to neighborhood property owners or something like that to consolidate with their properties. But after looking at this for some time and hearing some of these problems over the years, I think it's time that we do something really worthwhile to help this department out in some fashion, especially in the area of assigning some of these properties. And realizing also that going to tax court, the treasurer knows as well that it's very expensive. It's not a simple process. I think there's, what, a 3-year waiting period? Is that correct? For the tax title court?
We could take, once we have tax title and we put them into land court, it could be a year and a half.
Year and a half, yeah, right. So there's an awful lot of work that has to be done in the background. And in order to do that, you've got to have the personnel to continue working on this process. So, Eric?
Yeah, I just want to mention two things. One is we are doing some work, like my firm is doing some work in another town that did sell the tax liens. And basically what you're doing is selling your receivables. It's like a collection agency. They give you the money and you just post the payments, and as far as you're concerned, it's paid. Secondly, I know the land court, the tax title process, it's expensive, but there's some new legislation, there's an IGR that came out that if the town accepts it, it allows the legal fees and the land court costs that are collected from delinquent taxpayers to go into a special revenue account, and then those amounts, then the legal fees to collect it will be paid from that. So that way you don't have to appropriate it in your budget. So that's something that you might want to consider. It's kind of new this year, but that's like a tool that you could use.
Okay. So you could tack on the cost of the court costs to the tax property?
Yes.
Good.
You're telling me that the DOR recommended that we sell these delinquent taxes, is that?
The DOR didn't recommend
Okay.
it. They just have that as an option.
Okay, yes. And then you said this has not been implemented.
Not here, no.
Okay. Who's responsible in our organization to implement that?
Well, it's the treasurer. The treasurer can do, or the collector can do whatever the collector wants to do to collect taxes that's within the law. Doesn't need to get permission from anyone. But with decisions like this, it's usually a town-wide vetting, and because it's a philosophical decision. It's difficult because you've got taxpayers out there that are in a hardship situation. And you may want to work with those that are in a hardship to avoid that. You don't have to do them all. You can look at certain ones and only sell certain ones. And there are those that are out there that are taking advantage of the town's current tax process. So to me, if I was a town collector or a town officer, I would want to do it in a group and come to a decision that makes sense for the town. And I would include the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, Audit Committee, the Treasurer, Accountant. I would want to really vet it out.
I was under the understanding that we were already going to do this.
I was going to ask if maybe Ms. Spellman could give the update she gave to the audit committee when these results were first presented about the, 90-some parcels over the last few weeks? When we had looked at it last year, we had a third-party company come in, and right now we have $1.2 million in our tax title, and they would be willing to market $200,000 to $300,000 of that. Since then, in December, I have put in 90 parcels into tax title with the funds that I just received in July. What we're going to do with those, we have some that is land of low value. I've spoken with our tax attorney, and I can request the state to sell those at auction. And right now, that's where we're at. A lot of that is more marketable, obviously, than what's in there already. And our tax title attorney will go after, I won't say go after, but will notify people that have back taxes that I give her, and they could do payment plans. We're also receiving 16% on that when we do receive the payments. So right now, that's where we are.
Mr. Chair?
I just wanted to follow up on it. You said there was 1.2 million in tax title?
1.2 million, correct.
And then you mentioned the 300,000?
A maximum of 300,000 they would bid on.
Okay, they would be willing to pay, to
Which
buy
means that's the-
$300,000 of that portion?
Correct. That's marketable
Marketable property.
property, which we could go and auction ourselves, marketable property, and receive those funds ourselves. We do have two ways of doing that.
Yeah, Jim, go ahead, Jim.
90 properties that you just put in?
Yes.
1.2 million, or is that?
No, that's over and above. That's over and above. I do not at this point in time. I'm still working those.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair.
Okay. Mr. Barbaro?
Yeah, just to be clear, last year, this area was identified prior to, as the legislation was pending, although it was never budgeted. So there were no funds available up until July of this year to start this process. Has been identified. I know the treasurer has been working on it and pushing things forward. Up until July, we had no funds to do it. We talked the talk, we didn't walk the walk. So now that she's been diligently working this through and putting people's names in the paper and sending out letters, we're getting some responses, not to what we like, but some. So the funds that were budgeted are being expended to try to recoup some of this. Some of the problem with these tax title people is they only give you a percentage on the dollar. So we don't get every dollar.
No, they have to give you, they
It
have
was
to give
my
you
understanding
100,
that
they
they
have to
don't.
give you 100% under the law. So what they're gonna come in is look at, what you're doing now is you've taken on the responsibility of a bank, basically, because you've got all these, and this is your portfolio, you're a mortgage banker now. This is your portfolio. And some of that portfolio is gonna go bad. You're never gonna collect it. Some of it you will collect. What the third-party people do is they come in and they look at the portfolio and they'll say, okay, we'll buy these parcels, and they'll pick the parcels. They have to give you 100% of what's owed on those parcels. They don't, it's not a fraction thing, just to correct that.
No, I'm glad, because I was under the assumption it wasn't.
So usually you're left, they'll take the good parcels, which you're saying you could go out and do an auction on those and this is a good conversation, I was under the impression you didn't have time to do an auction. One of the things with the third party is they cut down on that time, effort, and, that's needed in your office. But if you're getting the funding to do that, that changes the landscape a little bit.
We just spoke to our tax title attorney Thursday, and she feels that we can go and do an auction. It'll be tight, but she feels we can do that before June 30th.
And how many parcels about?
I don't know at
There's
this
so many.
time. Yeah, there's so many. And just so you know, this year I did receive $20,000 in my tax title account. I have spent almost $11,000 just advertising and recording those at the registry. So it does take money. I took
Mrs. Ward?
I received $20,000 and spent about $11,000 so far. Thank you. You're welcome.
Can you give us an approximate number? What is the total dollar amount owing in back taxes? Because when you said about 2%, how much is that?
It's 1.2 million, right?
1.2 million in tax
2%
title.
of what?
Well, 2% over, some of those go back to the 90s, I would assume.
Some go back even further.
Okay, I
So
just
it's
wanted-
added up.
Yeah, because when you say 2%,
And then interest has been added on.
it's not really, urgent, but when you talk 1.2 million, it's urgent.
Because if you think 2% of your tax budget, and you add that each year, and then you add interest on top of it, it's gonna compound pretty quick.
That doesn't include the 90 she just put in there.
That's right.
Correct.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, Jim?
It just says,
You gotta talk into the mic.
foreclosures were taken to auction. Do you know how many we took to auction last year or this year?
What has happened in the past is the town has voted to take those foreclosed properties and return them to the redevelopment authority for them to sell, so the town has not really reaped any benefits of that.
Right, so all the money goes back to the redevelopment authority.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay, Tony?
Okay, the next topic is Title V receivables, and this is the exact same issue as when we did the water liens and soil liens. It's not a material weakness because it was a much smaller amount, but the same fix will take care of this problem. So it's not a major problem. Next is retiree health insurance withholdings, and what we understand is there's different methods of collecting from the retirees. Some is monthly, some is quarterly. So it results in some strange balances. If you're paying before you get the money, you have a deficit in the account until you get the money. Talked with Donna a little bit, and it came up at the audit committee meeting that a lot of these retirees are on fixed income, that there has not been any defaults. So I think the town is kind of working with the retirees, and there may be a deficit, but it might only be there for 30 days or 45 days, and then it gets filled. So Donna's position is that until there start to become defaults, to basically stick with the way it's being done, which I would concur with that. Okay. The next area is special revenue withholdings, special revenue funds. And basically, that is something that's been being worked on the last couple of years. With the whole munis, trying to know what your ending balance is and all that, you really didn't know what was happening in these funds. You'd have to put it on an Excel spreadsheet and say, here's my beginning balance, here's my revenues, here's my expense, here's my ending balance. When that was getting done, I started noticing that a lot of these accounts don't have any activity. So I said, well, why do we have it? Can we use the money for something else? Can we talk to the department heads? Maybe they can use it. If it's a public works special revenue or a police special revenue, maybe they have something they can use it on legally. So I brought that to the attention of the town accountant and the town, and this has been an ongoing process. You've been closing some of these out. There are so many of them that it's not something that's going to be fixed very quickly. And the great thing about this is the new DOR director is a proponent of fixing these. If you get to a point where you don't know what it is, and you got a bunch of them that you don't know what to do with, that you can actually do what's called a housekeeping type of entry and bring that into the general fund. So, any questions on special revenues?
Will that have to come up at town meeting to move that money from special revenue accounts into the general fund, or can that be done by bookkeeping?
You could, but it could be a bookkeeping entry. If you want to go further, you could bring it to town meeting, but you could do that as a bookkeeping entry, because usually when you net out the small deficits and surpluses, the ending balance usually is not a big amount, but it could be. You have to go through the analysis.
So these amounts could end up as a E&D fund towards the end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is like a grant that you got in 2001, that whatever the grant was for, the money was spent for that purpose, all the paperwork got sent to the state, it got closed out, but there's still $822 there. And the state doesn't want that, it's just gonna sit there in perpetuity. So the new director's saying, take all those, get rid of the deficits and the surpluses, and do a housekeeping entry to bring it into fund balance.
Good, thank you. Anybody else, any more questions related to that? Okay.
I know the school's gone through theirs, because a bunch of them were school-related, so I know you've gone through a lot of yours as well. Compensated absences next. The last couple of years, the calculation's kind of been all over the place. It hasn't been consistent, which led me to believe one of the years was wrong. Either 14 was wrong or 15 was wrong. Everyone's in agreement that 15 is the correct number, and going forward, there's going to be a process in place with Harper's, I believe, that will calculate this better. Because not only for accounting purposes, it's important to know who's owed money out there for your vacation and sick. Is you don't want someone to be terminated and then have this big payout that you have to make, and without knowing it, you know. And so it's good to have that information. The ambulance receivables, we noticed, are just getting higher and higher each year because nobody's looking at it and writing them off or coming up with a policy to write them off. There are probably people on there that are deceased at this point that are still on the list. So somebody needs to go through that listing, look at what can and cannot be collected, come up with some sort of policy, and then quarterly, the fire chief should be coming to a selectmen's meeting and saying, okay, these are the 20 I want to write off for these reasons, and then a write-off is made. So the town does use a third-party billing company, which does a lot of the towns in the state, so that process is okay, the billing side. It's just when it gets here and it's not collected, that's where it needs to be addressed. Any questions on that?
Do you have a rough idea of the dollar figure?
Let's see. Well, it was 70, it was close to, I think, $500,000.
I was gonna say, I looked in 2009, you brought this up,
Yeah.
and it was $200,000 then. Okay, so about $500,000?
Oh, we brought it up in 2009?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, so it's up to about $500,000. That's what I think the number is, somewhere between 4 and 5. Any other questions on that?
You all set on the ambulance?
It's just important to have a written policy, because then people will say, well, why did that one get written off and this one didn't? So you should have a criteria and say, once it meets these 4 or 5 criteria, it will be written off. And there's boilerplate policies out there that you can adopt. Next is the transfer station, which is it's operated at a deficit for most of the time that we've been the audit firm here. And when you've got a cash handling activity that's operating at a deficit, it says, well, we should look at that a little closer. Why is it a deficit? Are the rates not high enough? Are the revenues not being turned over timely, or are they not being turned over? I mean, there's all kinds of things that should be looked at. It's a high risk activity, so that is something that I would say needs to be looked at. I know that as part of the 16 audit, we've agreed to to take a look at that, for no extra charge, just as part of the audit. We're gonna take a look at that and see what's happening there and why you have a deficit. Then you can choose to do what you need to. It could be a deficit because the rates aren't high enough, and you could say, well, we'll have the general fund support that and continue to support that, or there could be some other things going on. Any questions on transfer station?
Yeah, Jim, what do you have?
Well, just, it says, the amount of revenue generated is fairly sizable. So does that mean, I guess I don't know what it means. Why we're in a deficit if we're generating a lot of revenue?
Well, your costs are higher.
Costs are too high to...
Yeah. Your costs are higher.
And we had a slight surplus in 2015?
Because you applied some of the legislative deficit to that account. The account was operating, what, at about a $25,000 deficit, and some of the legislative money went to that account to get it up to speed.
The transfer station, I keep thinking about this. I kind of compare this to streetlights. I don't have a street light on my street, but yet I pay through to my taxes. But you look at it, there's a number of streetlights in town. It's there for public safety, public service. And maybe we should look at the transfer station the same light, that maybe we need to kind of increase the funding for it, because we know that if we can't increase the bag price. If we do, people won't buy them.
Right.
So you're kind of defeating the purpose. The resale value for these recycling items have dropped to the bottom, and you're just not getting the money from the recyclable anymore like we used to get. So maybe we should give some thought to that. I just kind of throwing up in the air, that's something that we should think about seriously. Look at it as a safety feature, just like if we do the street lights, because people will throw their garbage on the street, so we don't have to pick it up, and a lot of people to go there and do it. So just something to think about, that's all.
That's something we'll find out when we go through the process.
Yep.
If it's just a rate thing, then you got to decide, are we going to continue to do it through the general fund or not? I'm not saying increase the rates, that might not be the prudent thing, because
I think we go back, if we go back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, some of you may remember, but we talked about that, the closing the landfill, the recycling center, going to private contractors for each house is whole, and we spent a great deal of time talking about that, and so we kept it open.
Maybe we could even put it in a vote to see the town's interest. Are you interested in funding a little bit of this through taxes, or maybe 5 years later, now is it time to think about getting rid of it?
Enterprise fund.
It's something, I think we should have probably extend the conversation to this as we get closer to town meeting. It's something to think about.
Okay.
Go ahead.
When are you going to finish this audit for the transfer station?
Oh, that'll be done as part of the 16 audit, so we'll probably do it over the summer.
Okay.
And then if there's something urgent there, we can expedite just reporting on that. We can do a separate small report on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the first one to admit that I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes when it comes to budget and finance. And I wanted to get to this before you go to the informational items, so I apologize if I'm premature. But you talk about the Title V betterments, that you're going to be looking into those, special revenue funds. You have high praise for the new Director of Accounts. And there's information on other items here as well. But I guess I'm still not sure what all this means in terms of the fiscal health of the town. I know you said that June 30th this year is going to look better than June 30th of last year. But how comfortable should we feel walking out of here tonight? A, that the town is on the right track? And are we going to see specific numbers at some point to confirm what we're being told in terms of whether we should be optimistic or pessimistic? And again, I apologize if it seems like it should all be here in front of me, but I don't feel, I guess, good or bad about what I'm hearing. I have a lot of questions about where we are.
Yeah, and that's a good thought. I mean, we ended 14 with a $3.3 million deficit, whatever that was. We ended 15 with a $600,000 or $700,000 deficit, so I guess that was an improvement. But as for 16, the only thing I can say is you're looking at budget to actuals, and those are on. Your revenue forecasts, you're looking at those. Those seem to be on target. You should be looking through January. You should be at 7 months right now, so you should have 7/12 except for like motor vehicle and some of the things that are seasonal. So is it that, like on your revenue forecast and your budget to actual, is it that far ahead of the game that it looks like it's going to be a positive? Sometimes you don't know these things till the year ends.
I guess.
And that's what's difficult, because the big motor vehicle bill, I think, just went out or is about to go out, right? So you still don't, and that's a big number, and you don't know what you're going to collect from that. So so a lot of that stuff is information you get as you get closer to the close, and it's hard to make that determination now. Things like going out to do the tax assignment, closing out some of these special revenues may add, if you end up doing that, may add to that the revenue at the end.
I guess perhaps part of it is that you're talking to her about specific figures in terms of projections and so forth. And you've seen the numbers, and she sees the numbers, but there are no numbers here.
Oh, I haven't seen the 16 numbers.
Okay.
We've reported on the 15 numbers about 4 months ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And a report was issued on the 15 numbers, which showed a $600,000 deficit. I haven't seen any of the 16 numbers. We haven't done any audit work in 16. That's why I'm relying on what these folks are telling me.
All right.
I think,
Okay,
if you're looking for the numbers, there's another part of this audit report.
Okay.
That's got all the numbers. I mean, I think that
Okay,
might be
maybe
the
that's what
misconfusion, is that the management letter is sort of a verbal explanation, and
Right.
then there's more numbers than you can shake a stick at in the other half of the report.
Okay.
That's what you were looking for.
Right, and I'm assuming those.
Yeah, and we did that in November. When we finished that report, we did the numbers in November. Now this is the management letter.
All right, so those are all available.
So you missed part one, I guess.
To anyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, if you'd like to see that report, I'll make sure you have a copy of it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Numbers.
Mr. Chair?
Good reading, at night when you got
Yeah,
nothing else to do.
I'm sure.
Mr. Chair, as far as the transfer station goes, it is supposed to be, and it is set up as a enterprise account, which is not tax supported. So that's a decision that has to be made what to do with that. It's not supposed to be funded through any of the town finances. It's supposed to be self-sufficient as long as, like, the water and sewer accounts are. That's the way it was set up prior, and there's a discussion about what needs to be done with that, as far as whether it needs to be moved back into the town side or what to do. That's what the town manager's been researching and trying to address in this budget.
Well, that's why I brought it up, so that we can talk about it and try to make some decision on what we want to do with the transfer station. If we don't talk about it, then we don't know what it is that we can or can't do, so.
Okay, on the informational items, I don't think we have to go through all of them. The two most important are on page 15, which is the policy and procedure manual. That's something I'd like to see some progress on. It is a requirement. The town does try to follow the legal Department of Revenue policies. it would be good to get it all codified in a manual that for everyone to use. And then, secondly, and then we can take some questions, is just as part of that policy and procedure manual, I'd like to see a section of it address risk, which is your cash handling departments that are not being collected by the treasurer-collector, your town clerk, your transfer station, your police permits. There should be some sort of process where someone from either the treasurer-collector or the town accountant's office goes down and does some sort of reconciliation or some sort of check and balance on what's happening there. And it should be done on a surprise basis, and you do 1 or 2 departments every quarter. And I know that the resources are short in those departments, but it is something that, as the town starts to recover and become more financially solvent, that the town should consider.
Mr. King?
I'd just like to comment that I did have a chance to speak to Mr. Hickey a few weeks ago, I guess, about proposed fiscal policies that the Finance Committee has developed over the last couple of years, presented to the last town manager. Nothing was done with them. And we're certainly hoping that these can be presented to the Board of Selectmen soon. I think it would be advantageous for the town to be able to go to town meeting knowing that this particular expectation has been identified by the last several audits. It's been identified by the Department of Revenue. And the beginning point should be take a look at what we've drafted and let's work from there. But they're there, they're sitting there, they're ready to be worked on. I don't see any reason why this couldn't be done before town meeting.
I do know that what part of the compact that we just signed is giving us a grant to work on all these policies across the town, fiscal policies. That is part of why we joined the compact. That is freeing up some grant money for us to go through a lot of the policies, create some of the policies, and that was just signed 2 weeks ago. So that's part and
We have a set
parcel.
of policies. I mean, developing procedures is a different, much more detailed work, and I certainly understand that. But the beginning point is with your policy. And Finance Committee has spent quite a bit of time researching that. It's a body of work to begin with, then work from there.
So is there any plan for the select board to review that policy, financial policy? Because this is very important.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I did have an opportunity to meet with Mr. Kane a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3, and he presented to me some policies that the Finance Committee's been working on. In my kind of tickler file, so to speak, I'm trying to finish up my budget for budget proposal for fiscal 17. Hope to do that in the next couple of weeks, and sometime probably in April, March or April, we can then shift gears. Take a look at some of the financial policies that the Finance Committee has presented, invite them to a board meeting so they can have a conversation, the board can ask questions on why they propose what they have, and try to get those in place as quickly thereafter as we can.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay. I guess you're on, Mr. Roselli. Is that the end of it?
That's the end of it, yeah.
That's the end of it. Good deal. Well, thanks, everybody. What,
The very last. Oh, do I have a typo?
No, I just want to know.
Oh, our audit cannot be relied upon to detect fraud or illegal acts that may exist.
yeah.
Could I ask a question? When was this management letter produced?
About 3 or 4 weeks ago?
Yeah. Mr. Chair. So it was presented to the town in a draft form in early February.
10th, I think, yeah, February 10th.
And we've had an opportunity to comment on those. We've also, Mr. Roselli's also given us the opportunity to provide responses that are included in your management letter this evening. So it's been in draft form. I think it's been in front of the audit committee now since early to mid-February.
I think the audit committee received that letter probably like the first, second week of August, I think. February. And then on February 17th, we had a meeting to review the comments that you made. So it's about that.
So this date that says on the very first page, November 13th, 2050, is that when you started?
That's when we stopped
Okay.
the audit. So we haven't looked at anything after that date.
Okay.
So even though this just got issued a month ago, it was for work done through November.
Well, that's great. We're kind of fortunate to see that we had some good consistency with the personnel in the audit department, especially with the auditor, so we're able to really move through very quickly. But I was recently made aware that the town accountant, Don Allett, will not be returning after the fiscal year, June 30th, because the selectmen made some decision. And by taking this action, in reality, we're going to lose the consistency that has been built to resolve our financial shortcomings. And as selectmen, you have an opportunity to correct this error. It only takes 3 people with common sense to kind of reverse this decision. This is very important. We need to really reconsider this. We'll be losing the consistency in the accounting office, which is badly needed this time. The assistant accountant has left. We have a new person coming in, and we're going to be crawling for a long time. With the new people coming in, that's going to back us up months upon months without that consistency. So I would urge you to really reconsider that decision. This is very important. Jim?
I have 2 more questions about the audit. Can we still ask questions? Okay, that's fine. So how do we set the tax rate then if we just got the audit?
Well, the financial piece was issued back in November.
In November, so that was,
This is the
that went to the
the
Bureau,
critique.
Director of
This is
Accounts,
the-
and he certified the tax rate? Okay. And then speaking of the basic financials, where would you find the stop-loss reimbursements? For the, the self-insurance trust? Now, I went back as far as 2009, and I didn't see anything, and then in 14, it mentions, first time I ever saw it in the in the column, about 50-something thousand. Then in 15s, it just has, nothing.
Oh, the reimbursements?
Right, the stop-loss reimbursements.
I'd have to look at the pages, but in 15, it shouldn't be much in 15. 14 should have been a big amount. Did you look at 14?
Yeah, 50,000, which
No.
we were told that, we had 13 catastrophic claims.
No, it
that-
should be, I don't have it in front of me, but I
I have
thought it
it.
was, oh, if you
Give me one
bring them
second.
over here, I can look at it. Yeah, I think in 14, it was about 700,000.
I have too many papers. Give me a second.
You're on the receipt, wrong page. Okay, so
That's the only place I could see it in there.
you're missing page, it's page 19. Yep, it's on page 19.
If I look on page 19, I can see that.
Is 19 on the back of this? Let's see. Yeah, no, 19 might be on the back. No, you need page 19. You don't have 19?
I don't know if I have the whole thing, I was too cheap.
You're looking at the receivable, which is the amount that was due at the end of the year.
So on page 19 of that?
Page 19, is that, what year is that? Fiscal?
It's 14. When we just
14. If you look on page 19, you'll see it. It's about 770,000, I think. I was gonna say page 19, too.
Anything else before we adjourn? Questions, comments? Mr. King?
You know, I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Millett has mentioned, and we've talked a little bit earlier tonight about difficulty of getting things that we know we have to do, that we have to get done because we don't have enough people in place. And I think we need to try to maintain the consistency with the personnel to the extent that it's a benefit of the town to do that. So I guess I just would reiterate his request that it be given some very careful consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so,
Motion to adjourn?
not hearing any, I think it's time to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, good.
Motion to adjourn?
Do we have to adjourn?
Second.
Finance Committee.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Finance Committee, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You don't know about the concept?